I never thought I'd be sitting here, in this nursing home, recounting the twists and turns of my life. It's funny how things change, isn't it? One minute you're walking down the aisle of a quaint little church in San Francisco, your heart brimming with hope and your mind filled with dreams of a perfect future. I can still feel the warmth of that California sun on my face, smell the fragrance of the roses that adorned the pews. Oh, how naive I was back then, thinking I had it all figured out. If someone had told me on that day, as I stood there in my white dress, that I'd end up raising Samuel and Luke all by myself, I would have laughed it off as some kind of cruel joke. But life, as we all know, has its own plans. It's like a roller coaster, taking you on unexpected twists and turns, leaving you breathless and sometimes heartbroken. I remember dreaming of a future filled with happiness and stability, just like any newlywed couple. We had it all mapped out, the house with the white picket fence, family barbecues on Sundays, yearly vacations to Disneyland. But oh, how quickly those dreams can shatter. Life has a way of teaching us that no one is immune to adversity. I learned that lesson the hard way, feeling like I'd been thrown into the deep end without a life jacket. Now, as I sit here, my mind wanders back to the day my children sold my house. I can still hear the sound of the auctioneer's gavel, sealing the fate of the home where I'd raised my boys, where every wall held a memory. They divided up my possessions as if I were already gone, each claiming a piece of my life as their own. The betrayal cut deep, like a knife twisting in my heart. They shipped me off to this place, this waiting room for the end, as if I were nothing more than an old, worn-out armchair they no longer had room for. 3 years have passed since then, each day blending into the next in a monotonous blur. And now, they've returned. I wonder what they expect to find. Do they think I've been sitting here, withering away like a flower without sunlight, eagerly awaiting their return? Little do they know, life had one more surprise in store, for them and for me. You see, adversity may bend us, but it doesn't have to break us. I've learned that even in the twilight of our lives, we can find strength we never knew we had. And as I prepare to face my children, I feel a fire rekindling within me. They may have taken my home, but they can't take my spirit. This old bird still has a few songs left to sing. You know, they say men are often considered the pillars of the family. But my Kenneth, he sure turned that idea on its head. I remember the day it all fell apart like it was yesterday. It was just another run-of-the-mill afternoon, and I dragged myself home after a day that felt like it'd never end. That's when I saw it, a note from Kenneth. At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. But then I noticed his clothes were gone, his things had vanished. It hit me like a ton of bricks, he was really gone. In that moment, I felt a strength I didn't even know I had, rising up inside me. I had to be strong, had to understand this new reality. Kenneth's note was full of excuses. His new partner didn't want other kids, just her own. So he left our boys, Samuel and Luke, 16 and 6, for me to raise alone. He promised financial help, but let me tell you, that check never came. We never saw Kenneth's hide nor hair again. When those divorce papers arrived, with Kenneth giving up his parental rights, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. Relief and despair fought a battle in my heart. My hands shook as I held those papers, thinking, how could he abandon us like this? It was a sucker punch for all of us. Samuel, my oldest, tried to put on a brave face. I can still hear him asking, Mom, we're gonna be okay, right? Trying so hard to hide his own fear. Little Luke, bless his heart, didn't fully grasp what was happening, but he felt his daddy's absence like a missing puzzle piece. I knew I had to be strong for my boys. The thought kept nagging at me, what if something happens to me? What'll become of them? So I started burning the midnight oil, looking for any extra work I could find. I'd tell the boys, you two deserve the best, as I signed them up for every activity under the sun. I was determined to give them all the opportunities I never had. I tried to be both mom and dad, to fill the Kenneth-shaped hole he'd left behind. They can't want for anything, I'd tell myself, even as I felt the weight of this double duty crushing me. My own life? Well, that took a back seat. Friends and family, bless their hearts, they'd say, Emily, you deserve to be happy too. Why don't you find someone new? But the thought of bringing a stranger into my boys' lives? It terrified me. How can I trust anyone after what happened? I'd wonder. I can't risk my children's happiness. I'd lie awake at night, thinking, if their own flesh and blood could abandon them, how could I ever trust a stranger to care for them? I didn't want to admit it, even to myself, but Kenneth's actions hadn't just hurt the boys. They'd cut me deep too. I'd loved that man with every fiber of my being, never saw that betrayal coming. Unlike many folks, I didn't have the luxury of time to deal with my own pain and emotions. Too many worries, you see. So I buried those feelings deep down in my soul, tried to bury them as far as they'd go. I made up my mind to cut ties with the past, not to dwell on it. I focused on the future, but getting there meant solving new problems every single day. Let me tell you, raising 2 kids alone? It's no walk in the park. Boys and girls, they're as different as night and day, like they're from different planets sometimes. I struggled to understand Samuel and Luke, to accept them, help them, protect them. It didn't always work out, but Lord knows, I tried every single day. This journey? It's been tough, but it's made me who I am. And you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. I never thought my overwhelming worry and desire to compensate for their father's absence would backfire like this. My boys, Samuel and Luke, they've grown into such selfish young men, it breaks my heart. To them, I'm nothing but a resource, a means to an end. Their favorite word? I want. The balance of give and take in our family? It's completely out of whack. I've given my all, everything I have and everything I am, but it's never enough. They just keep taking, always wanting more. When they hit their teens, things really went downhill. Any respect they had for me as their mother? It just about disappeared. When they were little, they were happy to let me shoulder all the responsibility, and oh, how that fed my guilt. Now, when we argue, they know just how to twist the knife. They'll shout that their father left because of me, using it as a weapon to end the fight and come out on top. They've learned that playing the blame game is a mighty effective way to manipulate me. In my quieter moments, I can't help but wonder, did I fail them somehow? Maybe I wasn't strict enough, or maybe I didn't say the right words at the right time. I love those boys so much, and I'm terrified of hurting them even more than they already are. But at this point, what's done is done. As my mother used to say, what's bred in the bone will come out in the flesh. From a young age, Samuel and Luke have been ruled by their emotions, making decisions with their hearts instead of their heads. I've faced so many challenges with them, but when push comes to shove, they always come running back to mommy for help. And me? With my mother's heart, I can't turn them away or set firm boundaries. So I always give in, despite their difficult behavior and self-centeredness. When I found out I was seriously ill, it was a shock to my boys. Not because they were worried about me, mind you, but because they suddenly realized they might have to step up and take some responsibility. It was like a light bulb went off, and suddenly everything became clear. Neither Samuel nor Luke was prepared for this twist of fate. They huddled together, making plans, but didn't bother to include me in the conversation. These grown men of mine, they weren't thinking about acting on any moral or humanitarian principles. No, they were convinced they were in the right, and they acted recklessly. First, they showered me with sweet words and empty promises, just to keep up appearances. Then they insisted I sign over all my property, claiming it was for my own care. After their relentless demands, sick and weak as I was, I finally gave in. As soon as we left the registry office, I knew what was coming. My beloved children's plan became crystal clear. The house, the money, even my old car and the garage, it was all divided up between Samuel and Luke in the blink of an eye. I can still hear Samuel's voice, trying to justify it all. She's been paying taxes all these years, why should we have to pay out of our own pockets now? And Luke, without a shred of remorse, agreeing, after all, it was that damn job that ruined her health. In a rare moment of solitude, I found myself pondering how I'd missed the warning signs. How could I have been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? All I ever wanted was to do my best for them. Samuel and Luke, they've convinced themselves that the state should take care of me now. The way they find excuses to justify their actions is truly astonishing. I overheard Samuel telling his brother, "She's worked her whole life, now it's the government's turn to look after her. For years, I've cared for and supported my children, but it seems that means nothing to them now. All that matters is finding someone to blame, no matter how absurd or illogical the argument. It's easier for them to believe and attack whoever they decide to blame, never admitting their own faults. They've decided it's my fault for ruining my health, and that the state I paid taxes to all these years should take care of me now. Without a second thought, they've sold off everything I own, dividing the money between themselves. I never imagined I'd end up here, in this nursing home for the elderly with special healthcare needs. The shock of it all still reverberates through my very being. When my boys, Samuel and Luke, left me here, I felt a profound sense of helplessness and uselessness that cut me to my core. I can still hear Samuel's words ringing in my ears, "Mom, this is for your own good." And Luke, bless his heart, couldn't even look me in the eye as he added, "You'll get the care you need here," his eagerness to leave painfully obvious. During those sleepless nights, I find myself analyzing every decision, every moment of my life, trying to pinpoint where I went wrong. Was it my fault? Was I too lenient, or perhaps too absent? These questions swirl in my mind like leaves in an autumn wind, but clear answers elude me. My reflections only serve to deepen the feeling of betrayal that's settled in my heart like a heavy stone. While I'm grappling with the weight of what's happened, it seems my boys are unburdened by any moral or ethical concerns. I overheard Samuel telling Luke, "Why should we sacrifice our future and our best years for someone who's not going to get better?" And Luke, without missing a beat or showing an ounce of remorse, agreed that they needed to think about themselves now. As time passes, it's like I'm fading from their lives, becoming a distant memory. They haven't had a father for years, and now, with me in this facility, it's as if they don't have a mother either. Neither of them feels the need to check on my health, my treatment, or even my mood. It's as if I've become completely irrelevant to their lives. They're living their own lives, going about their days as best they can. Sometimes, I wonder if they miss having someone who was always there to help and bail them out of trouble, but that seems to be the extent of it. It's been 3 years since that terrible diagnosis, 3 years I've spent in this place they chose for me. They've stripped me of the chance to live in my own apartment, of everything I once had. In all this time, they haven't visited once, not even a phone call. They're busy, they say, not interested in maintaining contact. I've stopped trying to reach out to them. When they walked out that door, I understood and accepted everything. No, I don't want to hear their flimsy excuses or their version of the truth. Sometimes, silence is the clearest and most honest answer of all. I've been abandoned, betrayed. That's all there is to it. There's nothing left to discuss or reflect upon. But you know what? I refuse to let this be the end of my story. I may be down, but I'm not out. I've weathered storms before, and I'll weather this one too. Who knows? Maybe life has a few more surprises in store, for me, and for my boys. After all, this old bird still has a song or two left to sing.
On a typical weekday morning, Samuel received an unexpected call on his home landline. An unfamiliar woman's voice asked if he was Samuel Johnson. Samuel, now using his wife's surname, nervously answered while inquiring about what was happening. The woman introduced herself as Hannah, a notary's assistant, and asked how she could get in touch with his mother, Emily Johnson. Samuel hesitated, then asked about the reason for the contact. Hannah explained it was related to a secret will, but couldn't reveal more details due to confidentiality. "Mom's secret will? That doesn't make any sense," Samuel muttered, struggling to understand what was going on. Confused and unsure what to do, Samuel considered that his father might have left an inheritance, but thought it would be more logical to look for the children rather than the ex-wife in that case. He vaguely answered that his mother was ill and in a nursing home for elderly patients with chronic conditions, adding that he wanted to know more about the secret will before bothering her. Hannah, the notary's assistant, asked for Emily Johnson's address, but Samuel said he needed to think and consult his brother Luke as he was confused. After the call, Samuel was shocked and bewildered. He decided he needed to talk to Luke and tell him about the conversation. Luke took a while to answer the phone, sounding sleepy and irritated at being woken up early on his day off. Samuel asked him to wake up and listen carefully as he explained the dialogue he had just had. Luke, now fully awake, was equally perplexed. They agreed they needed to verify everything and get as much information as possible before taking action. "Let's wait a few days, then try to contact a nurse at the nursing home where Mom is," Luke suggested. Samuel agreed and mentioned that he had already told the notary's assistant that their mother was in a medical facility. He said that if the assistant was diligent, she would already be calling all the nursing homes. Luke proposed they wait to see if the notary's assistant could find their mother. "This is very strange, Luke. Do you think Mom was hiding something from us?" Samuel asked, still trying to understand the situation. "I don't know, Samuel. But if there is something, we need to find out what it is," Luke thoughtfully replied. After 3 days of waiting and anxiety, Samuel and Luke were becoming increasingly nervous. Their mother, which hadn't occupied such a large space in their concerns for a long time, was now at the center of their attention. An irritated Samuel kept sending messages to Luke asking for updates, but Luke's replies were always vague and lacking information. At the end of the 3rd day, Luke finally called Samuel with news. "Samuel, I've discovered something that could change everything," he said with urgency in his voice. "What did you discover, Luke? I'm on edge here," Samuel replied, feeling a mix of expectation and apprehension. Luke explained that with a little financial incentive, doors opened more easily. He revealed that the notary had already visited their mother at the nursing home. During the conversation, Luke said something that reminded Samuel of a story he had almost forgotten. Samuel recalled that his mother sometimes talked about her brother Tyler, who had moved to a different state. He had a tough time starting over, but things seemed to turn around when he married a wealthy older woman, Samuel commented, still trying to process the information. "That's right. And now, Uncle Tyler has passed away and left his entire estate to our mother," Luke continued, confirming Samuel's suspicions. Samuel was stunned by the news. He could hardly believe what he was hearing, telling Luke it sounded like something straight out of a movie. Luke, slightly irritated by his brother's disbelief, insisted it was true. He explained that a nurse named Lisa had overheard the notary discussing the inheritance, which included several properties, houses, and cars. Luke added that Tyler's former wife had been the widow of a very wealthy man, suggesting their mother could be the heir to a substantial fortune. Samuel, still in shock, pondered how quickly the notary had acted. He speculated that they too were interested in finding the heir, likely due to the potential commission involved. Samuel concluded they needed to investigate further, recognizing that if true, this could change everything. The brothers agreed to meet the next day to discuss the situation and how they might benefit from it. They wondered if they would have treated their mother differently had they known the true extent of the inheritance. Now they were considering how they might rectify the situation if possible. On the agreed day, the brothers met at a local cafe, a place they had frequented since their teenage years. Seated at a discreet table, they began to strategize their next move. Though neither wanted to admit it, both were contemplating whether they should take action. Luke broke the silence, asking if Samuel thought their mom would forgive them for what they had done. Samuel sighed, looking at his brother. He acknowledged that while their mother had always been loving and forgiving, she was also fair and honest. Samuel admitted it wasn't easy to face, but they had built a wall of excuses to justify their actions. Luke, with a distant look, admitted feeling bad, but questioned the point of dwelling on the past. He wondered why they were suddenly worrying about their mom after living with the decision to send her to the nursing home for 3 years. Samuel replied seriously, pointing out that convincing oneself internally was entirely different from facing their mother's reproachful gaze and hearing her accusations. Luke, trying to maintain composure, suggested that if their mom had wanted to accuse them, she would have called when she realized they had abandoned her. An irritated Samuel questioned Luke's lack of conscience. Luke retorted that he wasn't solely responsible for the situation, reminding Samuel that he too had participated and accepted his share of the money. Luke admitted their actions weren't noble, but he didn't feel entirely guilty. Samuel asked Luke what they were going to do now, searching his brother's eyes for an answer. After a moment of silence, Luke replied that they needed to find out more about this inheritance, suggesting it might give them a chance to do things differently. The brothers discussed how they would face their mother's evaluation of their behavior. Samuel proposed that even if they apologized and she didn't understand, at least they would have tried. Luke, though worried about his mother's reaction, agreed to face the situation the following day. Preparing to visit Emily, the brothers bought several gifts, recognizing the importance of not arriving empty-handed. After 3 years of separation, they imagined various possible scenarios, but knew Emily's reaction was unpredictable. Upon arriving at the nursing home, a nurse led them to Emily, who was quietly reading. Seeing them, Emily closed her book and spoke.
I watched them come in, my 2 boys, now men, looking so uncomfortable and out of place. It was almost comical, if it weren't so heartbreaking. I was in the middle of a chapter in my book, a small pleasure I've come to cherish in this place. Just a moment, I said, keeping my voice steady. Let me finish this chapter. I could feel their surprise at my calmness, like a tangible thing in the air between us. They sat there, fidgeting like schoolboys called to the principal's office. When I finally looked up at them, I couldn't help but ask what brought them here after all this time. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, memories of lonely days and nights flooding back. Samuel hesitated, but Luke jumped in, saying they were worried about me. Worried? Now? The irony almost made me laugh. I kept my face impassive as I asked why they disappeared for so long. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, but slowly, the conversation began to flow. I could see Samuel trying to dance around something, asking roundabout questions. Luke talked about life's surprises, but I just listened, nodding occasionally. When I stepped away for a moment, I overheard Samuel scolding Luke for being too direct. It was like listening to them as children again, plotting and planning. Back in the common room, we watched TV together, an oddly normal activity in this surreal situation. Luke asked about my brother Tyler, and I saw Samuel shoot him a warning look. I simply said I hadn't spoken to Tyler in a long time. The boys were trying so hard to get something out of me, but I've learned to keep my cards close to my chest. After all, in this game of life, sometimes silence is your best play. As they were leaving, I couldn't resist making a slightly sarcastic comment. I saw them try to deflect it, to turn it into a joke. Oh, my boys, did you really think you could waltz back in here and everything would be the same? Life doesn't work that way, and neither do I anymore.
As soon as the brothers stepped outside, Samuel confronted Luke about his direct approach. He emphasized the need for subtlety if they wanted to uncover anything. Luke explained that they needed to break down the wall of distrust with their mother and regain her confidence. Samuel agreed, but wondered how to achieve this. The next day, Samuel anxiously awaited a call from Luke, who supposedly had some ideas. When they finally met, Samuel shared that he'd spent the night trying to understand their mother's perspective. He stressed the difficulty of the situation and the need to find a way to reconcile with her. Luke responded defensively, insisting he wasn't a monster and was also trying to understand everything. The brothers debated how to approach the inheritance issue with their mother. Samuel thoughtfully suggested being honest and admitting their mistakes. However, Luke was reluctant to reveal they knew about the inheritance, worried it might put them in a vulnerable position. They agreed on the necessity of overcoming Emily's mistrust. Samuel proposed asking their mother directly what she wanted and admitting their wrongdoings. Luke disagreed with Samuel's direct approach, suggesting they should show genuine remorse without directly mentioning the inheritance. Samuel argued that honesty was key to regaining Emily's trust, believing sincerity might help her understand they had changed. The brothers speculated that Emily might ask to return home and reclaim her apartment. Samuel considered this a true test of their sincerity. Luke expressed concern about the cost of buying a new apartment for their mother, bluntly stating it would be expensive. Samuel, however, viewed it as a necessary investment, arguing that the benefits of rebuilding their relationship with their mother outweighed any cost. After further discussion, Luke reluctantly agreed to Samuel's plan. Samuel felt an inner satisfaction at having persuaded Luke, a rare occurrence. They decided to visit their mother again in 3 days to apologize and propose reconciliation. During the second visit, Emily appeared somewhat more receptive. The brothers approached the topic carefully without directly mentioning the inheritance. Sitting on a park bench, Samuel and Luke reflected on their visit to their mother. Samuel expressed his concerns and fears about the situation, wondering what would happen if everything went wrong or if their mother didn't accept their apologies. Luke tried to reassure him, emphasizing that they were in this together and needed to proceed with the plan, as it was their only option. Although still doubtful, Samuel recognized the importance of what was at stake. He agreed to buy an apartment for their mother, acknowledging the risk but seeing it as potentially necessary.
I could feel the tension in the air as my boys tried to navigate our conversation. It was like watching them walk on eggshells, each word carefully chosen, each glance filled with uncertainty. I kept my emotions tightly reined in, maintaining an emotional distance that I knew was hurting them, but I couldn't help it. The wound they'd inflicted was still raw, still bleeding. Samuel, always the more sensitive one, broached the subject of my illness. His voice was gentle, hesitant, as he asked how I was really feeling. It took me back to when he was a little boy, always so concerned about others. I answered honestly about my stable condition, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Stable, but at what cost? Then Luke, my fiery, impulsive Luke, started talking about their mistakes and how sorry they were. His words hit me like a physical blow. He said they were afraid of losing me, like they'd lost their father when they were children. Oh, the irony of it all. They were afraid of losing me, yet they were the ones who'd thrown me away. I listened carefully, every word etching itself into my heart. As much as I wanted to brush off their apologies, to hold on to my anger like a shield, I felt it starting to crumble. When Luke mentioned their father, I was transported back to those dark days, the pain as fresh as if it were yesterday. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. If we were going to repair this relationship, I knew what I needed. I told them I wanted to go back to my own home. The words hung in the air between us, a challenge and a plea all at once. I watched their faces carefully, wondering if they'd rise to meet it. Part of me hoped they would, while another part feared the disappointment if they didn't. This was their chance to prove that their words weren't just empty promises. As I waited for their response, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether I was about to fall or fly.
Samuel agreed to Emily's request, and the conversation shifted to other topics without further discussion of the inheritance. After the visit, the brothers continued their discussion on a park bench. Samuel stated that they needed to accept their mother's conditions and suggested they split the cost of buying a new apartment for her. Luke seemed resolute in his decision. Samuel, still worried, was reassured by Luke, who emphasized that they were in this together. Luke pointed out that any failure would affect them both, and they had to follow through with their plan. Despite his doubts, Samuel recognized the importance of what was at stake. He agreed to take on the financial risk of buying the apartment, saying, "All right, Luke, let's do this for Mom." The brothers' decision to invest in a new apartment for their mother marked a significant turning point in their relationship with her. It was a concrete step towards making amends and rebuilding trust. As they sat on the park bench, the weight of their past actions and the potential for redemption hung heavily in the air. The bustling park around them seemed oblivious to the emotional turmoil these two men were experiencing. Children laughed on nearby swings, joggers passed by, and elderly couples strolled hand in hand, all reminders of the family life they had disrupted and now hoped to restore. The financial commitment they were about to make was substantial, but both brothers understood that the real investment was in healing their fractured family. As they rose from the bench to leave, there was a newfound sense of purpose in their steps. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, they were walking it together, united in their goal to make things right with their mother.
I never thought I'd be in this position, negotiating with my own children about my living arrangements. It's a strange feeling, like the world's turned upside down. When Samuel and Luke started talking about buying an apartment for me, I felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, suspicion, and a fierce need to protect myself. I've been burned before, you see. So when the topic of ownership came up, I didn't hesitate. "The apartment needs to be in my name," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "It's a matter of security for me." I could see the surprise on their faces, maybe even a flicker of hurt. But I've learned the hard way that good intentions aren't enough. To their credit, they agreed without much fuss. Maybe they're finally starting to understand. Then I brought up the money from selling my car and garage. It still stings, thinking about how they disposed of my possessions like they were nothing. "You sold my car and garage," I reminded them, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I want that money back." I half expected them to argue, but they agreed, albeit reluctantly. I could almost see the wheels turning in their heads, probably thinking this was the price they had to pay to regain my trust. And they're not wrong. When it came to choosing the apartment, I didn't make it easy for them. Call it petty if you want, but after everything I've been through, I think I've earned the right to be a little demanding. "I want something as comfortable as what I had before," I told them. I could see the strain on their faces as the costs mounted. When I asked for the $50,000 I estimated I'd lost from the sale of my car and garage, Samuel's jaw nearly hit the floor. "That's a lot of money, Mom," he said, his voice a mix of shock and disbelief. "Yes, it is a lot of money," I wanted to say. "But so is a mother's love, her sacrifice, her lifetime of care, and look how easily you threw that away." But I held my tongue. This is a test, you see. A test of their sincerity, their commitment to making things right. And as much as it pains me to admit it, a small part of me is hoping they pass. Because despite everything, they're still my boys. And maybe, just maybe, there's a chance we can rebuild what we've lost. But this time, it'll be on my terms.
After another stressful session with Emily, Samuel and Luke sought support from each other. Luke worriedly commented that their mother was being very cunning, first with the apartment and now with the money. Samuel agreed, noting that she seemed to be trying to reclaim everything she had lost. They realized Emily was using the situation to do so. Samuel concluded determinedly that they had no choice but to proceed with the plan, as it was the only way to regain their mother's trust and access the inheritance. The next day, Samuel called Luke to ask if he had also received a message from Emily. Samuel expressed relief that he wasn't alone in this situation, saying that their mother was testing them and they were going through a real ordeal. The brothers agreed to buy a modest gift for Emily, given the significant amount of money they had already spent on her demands. Luke suggested bringing something simple but meaningful. On the day of celebrating Emily's new apartment, Samuel and Luke were excited, hoping she would finally reveal the inheritance. The brothers' emotions were a mix of anticipation and anxiety as they prepared for this pivotal moment. They carefully selected a gift that they hoped would convey their sincerity without appearing overly extravagant. As they approached Emily's new apartment, the weight of their past actions and the potential for reconciliation hung heavily in the air. They knew that this celebration could be a turning point in their relationship with their mother, for better or worse. The brothers shared a knowing look before ringing the doorbell, silently acknowledging the significance of what was about to unfold.
I sat at the table, watching my boys arrive with their gifts and treats. Their eager smiles reminded me of the many Christmas we celebrated in the past, when they were still my little angels. But we're not in that world anymore, are we? As they settled in, I started talking about family, including my brother Tyler. I could see their eyes glazing over, their minds elsewhere. They were probably thinking about the inheritance they were so sure was coming their way. When I mentioned Tyler's name, I noticed Samuel's little jump. He tried to hide it, bless him, but a mother always knows. Remember your uncle Tyler, who moved to another state? I asked, beginning my little story. They nodded, feigning interest. Samuel even chimed in, saying I'd mentioned him a few times before. Oh, if only they knew what was coming. I spun my tale, watching their faces carefully. I shared about Tyler's struggles after moving to another state, his lucky break marrying a wealthy older woman, and inheriting her fortune when she passed away. I could see the excitement building in their eyes. Luke couldn't contain himself, asking if Tyler had become rich. I nodded, pausing for effect. Then I dropped the bomb. But unfortunately, Tyler lost everything. Bad investments, you see. He ended up spending all the fortune. In the end, he died alone and in poverty, leaving no inheritance at all. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Samuel, ever the skeptic, asked if it was really true that Tyler had lost everything. I confirmed it with a smile I couldn't quite hide. Then came the kicker. And you know what? This whole inheritance story was an act. Luke's confusion was palpable as he asked what I meant. I explained it all, the planned story, the fake notary's assistant who was actually a nurse from the hospital. I wanted to test if they cared about me as their mother, not just for the inheritance. As realization dawned on their faces, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. I'm disappointed that you believed the inheritance story so easily, I told them, my voice heavy with emotion. And I've already written my will, excluding both of you. The devastation on their faces was almost too much to bear. Luke, always the more emotional one, stood up abruptly and left without a word. Samuel tried to stop him, but Luke's trembling voice said it all, there's nothing more to do here. For once, Samuel followed his brother without resistance. As I watched them leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me. Relief that it was over, sadness for the pain I'd caused, but also a sense of having done what was necessary. Sometimes a mother's love has to be tough, I thought to myself, a small smile playing on my lips. It's a bittersweet victory, but a victory nonetheless. Maybe now they'll understand the true value of family, of love, of the things that really matter in this life. And who knows? Maybe this harsh lesson will be the beginning of our healing. Only time will tell.
As Samuel and Luke walked through the streets, the silence between them was palpable. Samuel, his voice filled with uncertainty, asked Luke what they were going to do now. Luke stopped and looked at his brother, declaring with determination that they needed to start making things right and show their mother they had learned their lesson. The two brothers, now aware of the error of their ways, realized they had a long road ahead to rebuild their mother's trust and love. They vowed to do what was necessary to correct their mistakes and regain their bond with Emily, not for any inheritance, but for their mother's genuine love. The journey home was long and thoughtful. For the first time in a long while, Samuel and Luke began to talk honestly about their lives, their mistakes, and what they truly valued. They realized that in their pursuit of wealth and success, they had lost sight of what really mattered: family, love, and honesty. Upon reaching home, the brothers sat together to plan how they could demonstrate their remorse and love for Emily. They decided to start with small actions, like visiting her regularly and helping with whatever she needed, without expecting anything in return. This moment marked a turning point for Samuel and Luke as they began to understand the true meaning of family and unconditional love. Their conversation continued late into the night, filled with reflections on their past behavior and hopes for reconciliation. As they planned their next steps, there was a sense of renewed purpose and determination in their voices. The brothers knew that rebuilding their relationship with Emily would take time and patience, but they were committed to the journey ahead. Their experience had taught them a valuable lesson about the importance of family bonds and the dangers of taking loved ones for granted.
I never thought I'd see the day when my boys would truly change. At first, I was skeptical, my heart hardened by years of disappointment and neglect. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice a shift. It was subtle at first, like the first whisper of spring after a long, hard winter. Sunday lunches became our new tradition, and oh, how those meals filled my heart. The air around us, once heavy with unspoken resentments, now rang with laughter and honest conversation. I found myself looking forward to these gatherings, my cynicism slowly melting away like ice in the warm sun. Samuel and Luke, they were really trying. I could see it in the little things, the way they'd show up early to help me prepare, how they'd remember little details about my life here. Slowly but surely, they were rebuilding the bridge between us, plank by plank, nail by nail. It reminded me of when they were boys, working together on their treehouse in the backyard. As I watched them now, men grown, I felt a warmth I thought I'd never feel again. I realized then that I had one final test for them. The will, that dreaded document that had started this whole mess. On a sunny afternoon, as we shared a meal in my new apartment, I brought out the updated copy. With trembling hands, I passed it to them, explaining that I'd included them again. The tears in my eyes matched theirs as I told them, I don't need a will to know I have my sons back. They embraced me then, promising to be the sons I always deserved. In that moment, I knew the true inheritance I was leaving them wasn't money or property. It was the unconditional love we'd rediscovered and the life lessons we'd all learned. As we sat there, bathed in the golden afternoon light, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. We'd been through the fire, my boys and I, but we'd come out stronger on the other side. And isn't that what family is all about? Standing by each other, even when it's hard, and finding our way back to love. I may be old, but I've learned it's never too late for new beginnings. And this, right here, feels like the sweetest beginning of all.